What if healing trauma doesn't mean reliving the trauma and going over and over the circumstances? What if trauma that's actually hidden but causing you physical symptoms were actually relatively simple to heal if you know the right methods? Hello, I'm Patricia Warby, PhD, and my specialism is healing trauma through the body, i.e., somatically. Why do I do this? Well, I outline all of the reasons in my free ebook, free to download below in the description, Hidden Trauma, because I passionately believe that people shouldn't have to suffer these long-term ongoing symptoms, some of which are very unusual and you might not have even linked to the fact that you have hidden trauma. I went over that last week. You need to know, however, that you don't have to be stuck with these symptoms, and that talk therapy, whilst very useful for many things, seldom reaches the parts of your body that are actually activated by these hidden experiences in your unconscious brain. So, why do I believe somatic therapy is the way to go? Well, interestingly, our autonomic nervous system links from the back of our brain and goes all the way down through all the organs of our body, creating a sort of homeostatic balance. It helps the organs to regulate, the heart to beat, your digestion to work, but it's all unconscious. If you had to think about digesting your food or your heart beating, well, that would be really uncomfortable. And what if you got it wrong? These things have to actually be going on behind the scenes because there's a whole system dedicated to that. And the autonomic system is the one that actually does that. And it has a sort of balancing state between parasympathetic, which is the slowing down the rest and digest system, and the sympathetic system, which speeds everything up. And if your balance is wrong, you may find that you're on a sort of a seesaw of being in sympathetic dominance. What we term sympathetic dominance means that your stress response is at a really high, unnaturally high level all the time, doesn't actually come down, doesn't have that balancing factor. And so individual stresses in the life can actually trigger your system into really strange responses. And that's what I discussed last week, some of the physical symptoms that actually might give a hint to the fact that you have some hidden trauma in your system. Now, this week, obviously, I'm focusing on what you can actually do about that, because it's really important that you don't believe that this is something you've got to live with forever and ever. If you understand your nervous system a little more, if you understand that the autonomics are not just as simple as I've described, I've described them a bit of a seesaw, but there's a little bit more complexity to that. And about 10 to 15 years ago, we discovered that there were 3 levels of the nervous system, 2 parasympathetic systems, in fact. One is a ventral system, which allows mammals like us to communicate, to make eye contact, to receive and give messages of safety, safe connection. And that's a really important part of your nervous system. But if you had a breach of connection early in life, say an attachment wound of some kind or another, maybe one or other parent was distracted, was ill themselves, had their own mental health issues, you can often find that you didn't get those signals of safety, which are translated into your body through the autonomics. And so, as I described last week, children with that scenario often grow up highly sensitive to their environment and may react in strange ways. And then they grow into highly sensitive adults who are very prone to chronic long-term illness and pathology. So if this ventral vagal, what we sometimes call the green zone, it's the sense of being loved and connected and feeling okay about yourself, if that doesn't come online reliably, you are left with the 2 lower systems, which is your sympathetic system, which is all about mobilizing you and getting you ready for action. It should be temporary, of course. If you're in that state all the time, it feels really, really uncomfortable. And then there's a lower parasympathetic system, also called the dorsal vagal complex. And this is all about freeze and shutdown and, dissociation, if you like. And many people who've had kinds of trauma, relational trauma, are living in those two lower systems and have never really reliably been able to access a safe feeling inside. And so this is really damaging for your long-term relationships, for your behaviors, for your achievement even. You may find you're highly driven because you're in sympathetic dominance all the time, but somehow things miss the mark and you never feel fully satisfied. So in order to access that really soothing and calming upper ventral vagal system, what do you need to do? Well, funnily enough, you're already engaging it by listening to me. It's actually linked with all the responses of your sensory information in the head and neck. And you're listening to me and you're hearing my voice, which is reasonably modulated. I'm going up and down with my voice, so I'm communicating safety to your nervous system. If I change my voice and make it rather robotic, there's an instant feeling in your body that feels, ooh, that doesn't feel comfortable. If I change the way I look at you and I become really hard or critical or angry looking, again, you'll have a response in your body. These things are completely unconscious. They feed back into the brain, messages of safety or not. How can we enhance these messages so that we are able to overcome these hardwired responses of threat? Well, one of the ways I use is called emotional freedom technique, sometimes also called tapping. And it looks a bit strange when you first come across it. You're tapping on parts of the head and face, and you're saying certain things out loud, usually with a therapist, although you can do it on your own. And there are various parts that you're stimulating here. And guess which nerve you're stimulating when you're doing this? Some people do the one under the arm as well, and some people do the hand. This is your vagus nerve, all right? This is the upper ventral vagus nerve, the one above the diaphragm. But of course, it communicates to the one below the diaphragm as well, because it's all one nerve, just has two branches. And so feeling safe and connected actually changes your physiology. It changes the way your internal organs operate, so you can digest properly and sleep properly and just feel at peace. And tapping, if it's done properly, really engages the feeling senses whilst also stimulating those nerves, in particular the vagus nerve, which is communicating a safe connection. And so once I found EFT, it was one of the first techniques I personally used to get well, I found that I could lower my stress response reasonably quickly. Another technique that I use is EMDR, also called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And in this, you're usually using a movement of your eyes across from left to right, whilst imagining certain memories or sensations in your body that reflect something that happened to you in the past. Because what EMDR does is it stimulates a part of your brain bilaterally, so in other words, from one side to the other, that actually, very much like dream sleep, enables your brain to reprocess memory that overwhelmed you. So it's like being in a waking dream state in some ways. In that, it's very similar, perhaps, to forms of hypnotherapy. But what it does precisely is it targets memories that overwhelmed you as a child or a young adult and allows you to get context, and it engages the prefrontal cortex and helps to integrate the brain's understanding of what happened to you so that it can be over, finally, done, finished, and no longer stimulating this threat response in your body. I do use other tools and techniques. I use a form of self-touch called havening, and I've got many videos that show that. I also use different forms of imaginal work in what we would think of as a hypnotherapy approach. The main thing to understand is that because these expressions of threat are all unconsciously held and unconsciously triggered. We have to work with the unconscious parts of your brain, and the senses and the body are the best and quickest way to do that. What we're doing is expanding that green zone of social engagement, feeling safe in your body and safe in your life. So, folks, that's what I do. And if any of this sounds interesting to you, please, if you want to grab your copy, go down and look in the description below. It's free to download. It just might be the thing that gives you an idea of how to get through your symptoms and how to come out the other side. This is such important information. I didn't want to risk not putting it out there. That's why I decided to make this book free. And if after reading that book you find you would like to come back and maybe connect with me, please do. You'll find all my links in the description below. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from you and seeing what you thought. Take care, everybody. Bye for now. Bye-bye.